All right, welcome back to math. We have not had a lesson in a while, and this is nothing new today. We're reviewing rounding. So if you don't have a whiteboard with you, go ahead and pause the video real quick, grab your whiteboard and marker. If you don't have that, you can always just use any scrap piece of paper. Okay, we're just reviewing and practicing. So at the top, we are reviewing rounding. Now remember, rounding is when we take any number and we make it easier to work with, right? Sometimes it's easier to round a number to the nearest thousand and do a quick estimate, right? So rounding is important. Sometimes questions will ask you to round your answer. So it's important we remember how to round. So we are going to practice the basics first. Rounding to the nearest 10. I provided you 4 numbers over here. So if you want to go ahead and write them down, we are going to round all 4 numbers to the nearest 10. We've got 13, 83, 6, and 181. So go ahead, write those down real quick on your whiteboard. Okay, I'll review quickly how I've taught you to do this. When you want to round something, what's the first thing you need to pay attention to? I'm hoping you're thinking, what place are we rounding to? Sometimes they will tell you. They will say, you need to round this number to the nearest 10. Other times they'll just say, round your number. So if you don't have a specific place to round, you can round it to any place you want. But we don't have that choice right now. It says round to the nearest 10. So what we do, if you forget, if we're rounding to the nearest 10, I find the tens place, which in this case, the 3 is in the ones, and my 1 is in the tens. So I underline the place I'm rounding to. Okay, so that's in the tens place. Then I draw my arrow to check the number next to it. Remember the rules. Now I'm going to write them right here. If your digit is 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 that you point your arrow to, does anyone remember what we do? We round down or stay the same. However, if the number you draw your arrow to is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we round up. All right, you got to remember that. If you forget that, keep thinking about it. So, this digit, is it in this group here or this group here? My 3. My 3 is in this top group, which tells me my underlined digit stays the same. So my 1, we're going to leave it as a 1. And then everything after that digit, remember, just becomes a 0. So if I had 1 extra digit here not underlined, I should have 1 more 0 in my answer. And then you can actually turn your brain on and think about it. If I have 13 and I want to get it to the nearest 10, it's in between 10 and 20. Does it make sense it's closer to 10 than 20? It should. All right, let's check our next number, 83. All right, we know we're rounding to the nearest 10, so I need to underline my tens place, draw my arrow to its neighbor. We have another 3. Well, we know if it's a 3 that we're checking, the digit that's underlined stays the same, so I leave it as an 8. Every other digit becomes a 0, and we only had one other digit to copy. So 83 rounded to the nearest 10 is 80. All right, 6. Sometimes this confuses people. We don't have a 2-digit number. We still approach it the same way. So if this is my ones place, would this be my tens place next to it here? Yep, it's got nothing in it, right? It's a 0. So you can fill in a 0. That helps me think about it. In my tens place, I have 0. Now I'm going to look at the number next to it. And what does the 6 tell me I have to do? I have to bump up. Remember? 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we need to round up. So we look at our number that's underlined, and we had a 0. So what does that need to become? Hopefully you're saying a 1, okay? So that 0 does become a 1. My 6 is then becoming a 0. Now if you think about that rationally with your brain, if I have 6 and I want to know what 10 it's closest to, well, this is a little strange, but it would be between 0 and 10. Is it closer to the 10 side? Yes. All right, we have one more. Now we're still only rounding to the nearest 10, so I don't need to worry about this 1 over here. I underline my tens place, and then I check out its neighbor. All right, now if you've forgotten anything on this side, the larger values, I can just copy them, okay? So I'm just going to copy my 1. Okay, now before I write my 8, Does the 1 tell me to bump it up or leave it the same? The 1 tells us that we leave it the same. Okay, and then I add 1 digit after, that becomes a 0. All right, so now we're going to move over here to rounding to the nearest hundred. I do need to erase these helpful hints. All right, now we're rounding to the nearest hundred, so we're not going to underline our tens place because we're rounding to the nearest hundred. So if you haven't copied your numbers down, go ahead. We've got 431, 687, 13, and 2,810. If you need to pause to copy them, go for it. Okay, so we're rounding to the nearest hundred. So I underline my hundreds place, which is a 4. And now I'm checking out my 3. Okay, well before I copy my 4 down, is my 3 telling me to keep the 4 the same or to round it up? We need to keep it the same. So the 4 stays a 4. Everything after it, there's 2 more places, becomes zeros. So the closest 100 to 431 would be 400, which makes sense. 431 is closer to 400 than 500. Let's try the next one. We're rounding to the nearest 100, so I underline my hundreds place and look at its neighbor. Now, before I copy my 6 down, we need to see if the 8 tells us to round it up. Does the 8 tell us to round it up? Yes, it does. So the 6 is going to become a 7, and then everything after it, count how many places. 1, 2, we just fill in with zeros. All right, now number 13. This is similar to the problem over here where we had number 6. Do I have a hundreds place? I don't. So you can just fill in a 0. You're allowed to do that. Okay, it helps you think it through. So I'm still going to check my hundreds place in the neighbor next door. Does my neighbor next door tell me to round this number up or down? We can't go up, right? So this 0 will stay a 0. And then everything else is zeros, right? So if I'm rounding the number 13 to the nearest 100, if I just think about this a minute, here's a quick little number line. If 100's way down there and 0's here, well, 13 is way closer to 0 than 100, right? So we've done it right, even though that one feels really funny. 13 is closer to 0 than it is to 100. So you wouldn't have to put 3 zeros as your answer. You could just give me 1. All right, let's try the last one. 2,810, rounded to the nearest 100. So I underline my hundreds place, and I check out the neighbor. Okay, can I copy my 2 over? Yes, it's a greater value than where we're rounding, so I can copy down my 2. Now, my 8, what is the 1 telling us to do? Keep the 8 the same or round it up? Keep it the same. And then we have 2 other places after the place I rounded to, so I need to add 2 zeros. So this number rounded to the nearest 100 is 2,800. Okay, so that was pretty quick. If you need more practice, you can always write your own numbers to round and keep practicing, okay? And you can always email me for help. So another thing you might run into on your practice is something where they'll say round to the greatest place value, okay? Now what they're saying isn't hard, it's just something you maybe haven't seen. So it depends on your number. In 391, what's the greatest place value I could choose to round to? Hundreds place? Yeah. So they want us to round this number to its greatest place. So I will underline my digit with the biggest value, which in this case is my 3. And I'm going to check the neighbor. Okay, so if I round this, what does the 9 tell me I'm doing with my 3? Bump it up, right? So my 3 becomes a 4, and everything after it becomes placeholder zeros. All right, so we rounded that number to its greatest place. And this number, is the hundreds place our greatest place? No, not even thousands. We have to go all the way over here to the 10,000s place. So underline the greatest place, and we'll do the same as before, check in with the neighbor. So on this problem, This 1 in the thousands place, what's it telling me to do to the 1 in the 10,000s place? Keep it the same. Okay? Now let's carefully count. How many other digits do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need 4 zeros. Now if you're getting tricked on the comma, remember, you start all the way past your ones and you hop 1, 2, 3, and put a comma. You go every 3 places. So on this number, we only have enough room for 1 comma. All right. So on this problem, we rounded it to the nearest 10,000s. Last problem. This time we need to round to the nearest 1,000 because that's our biggest value. Underline your biggest place. Check out the neighbor. We can see that the 9 is making us bump that 6 up. So my 6 will become a 7. And then I have 3 places to fill in with zeros. All right, so you will have some problems similar to that on your practice. And there's one other type of problem that I would like us to look at. Let me get some board space. Okay. Okay, this is another type of problem you have seen before. It's been a while, and you will see today. Which number of a list I'm about to write will round to 90 when rounded to the nearest 10? So here's our choices. I'm going to do A is 14, B 86, C 84, and D 98. All right. So go ahead. I need you all to write the numbers down. You don't have to copy the problem, but I need you to write down 14, 86, 84, and 98. And we're going to walk through this one. There's only one right answer. So which of these numbers, when rounded to the nearest 10, would be 90? So remember, this isn't a guess thing. Can you actually go through, check all your numbers, and make sure you do it correctly? Yes, that's what I expect you to do. So, 14. If you're like me, I'm thinking about a timeline. 14 is nowhere close to 90. I'm still going to do my work to make sure, okay? So we're rounding to the nearest 10. I'm going to get a different color for us here. Underline the tens place. Check the number next door. So is the 4 telling us the 1 will go up to a 2, or we leave it a 1? We have to leave it a 1. It's not a 5. So this number rounded to the nearest 10 is 10. All right, let's try the next one. 86, rounding to the nearest 10. Underline the tens place. Check in with its neighbor. All right, does the 6 tell us to bump the 8 up or leave it the same? Bump it up, right? So the 8 has to become a 9, and then my 6 becomes a 0. What do you guys think? Should I stop doing the problem now and assume I did it all right, or should we keep going and make sure? I hope you're saying keep going. That's what you should always do, because we may have made a mistake. Let's check 84. So underline my 8, check in with my 4. Well, this time the 4 is not going to bump the 8 up. So it's going to stay an 8. And then I fill in with a 0. We have one more option. It is in the 90s. It could be. So underline our 9. Check in with the neighbor. What do you guys notice? Yeah, this is one of those interesting ones. Okay? If I am looking at that 8, it's telling me to bump up my 9. But 9 is my biggest digit. So what do I have to do? Well, think, if I have 9 things, I add one more, what would I have? You would have 10. Okay? So what's really happening, we have to bump up into the hundreds place. So instead of a 9 here, I can change it to a 10. And then I have one more digit to add. And if you really think about that, 98 is in between 90 and 100, right? Those are its closest tens. 98 is very close to 100. So our answer has to be B. We were correct. All right, so on these types of problems, it is important that you go ahead and solve them all quickly to see which answer is the correct answer. All right, because you might have several numbers that look very close, and I don't want you to make a silly mistake. All right, thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm always happy to schedule an independent math review. I did one yesterday with the student, so just let me know how you're doing. All right, I will see you all later.